I'm Rachel McLeod. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and emotional wellness coach. And today I want to talk with you about three distorted agreements many people make with PTSD. And, I help people do the brain work to resolve the symptoms of anxiety, depression, and post traumatic stress. And gosh, when people come to me, a lot of times me included, when I came to me, and came to these tools were very tangled up in post traumatic stress and with post traumatic stress disorders. Many people come to me for therapy with anxiety and depression disorders, but really what they're suffering with is post traumatic stress disorder. And gosh, and this illness can really tangle us up. One of the things with post traumatic stress disorders, we don't really know where it's coming from. We don't know if it's happening. It's very confusing, and I want to talk about it as if you understand this thing exactly. So let me try to do that. But I also want to respect people who aren't as familiar with it, who aren't living with it, but have lived with somebody with it. And if you have lived with somebody with it and you have been a very intimate partner, it can be very possible that you have have experienced post-traumatic stress disorder as well, and maybe recovering from that. Maybe you don't know that you have that. So that's one of the things when we share nervous systems with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, then it is likely that we will experience that as well because we're learning it from them. And that's not to say that people with PTSD have cooties. It's just that you really need to understand what agreements not to make. Um, and there's no rule to this, but also if you don't make these agreements, it's more likely that you will recover and you will heal. Also, if you have PTSD and um, these are agreements you'll make with yourself. So this is not an them thing. This is, don't make these agreements with yourself that we're going to talk about, because they're traps. These agreements are distortions. They're not a real thing. They're imaginary things that we can really feel safe around, but the truth is they are lies. And um, and the more distorted thinking we have, and distortions come from the brain not being able to make accurate thinking. And so we'll grab onto something that makes us feel better and we'll hold on to that and run with it, but it actually isn't real. And I want to be very careful with this, and I want you to hear what I'm saying. This is very hard for me to explain. This is something I have felt very deeply. I have experienced PTSD. I have loved some of the PTSD, and I help people recover from PTSD. So this is stuff that I live and breathe, and not necessarily something I always give words to, especially because if working with me, I am always waiting for people's brain to tell me about their things. And then I'm over here like, yes, 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 good job, brain. Because these feelings come up, we get them processed, and the brain will tell us all about them. And so I am not great at explaining this to people, but I know these agreements and we're going to talk about them. And hopefully, this will give you enough to look inside and stop making these agreements. And if you've made these agreements, start backing out of them. Start sending different messages to yourself if you're the one with post traumatic stress disorder, or to your loved ones. Um, and so let's dive in with this. And so the first distorted agreement is I won't trigger you. I'm not going to trigger you. I'm going to do all the things I can do to make sure I don't trigger you. And we really want to prove our safety and that we can keep this person safe and that we care so much that we will not trigger them. And this is just not true. If you're in any relationship, and I even almost believe that the purposes of relationships from the brain and subconscious mind's perspective is actually to trigger things. It's almost, if you have the tools to process triggers, which I recommend you have, this is what I'm equipping people with all the time. This is what you can get equipped with. These are the tools to, when stuff comes up, can you process it? Can you get it resolved? because when you're in relationships with people, what they do is trigger you. They help bring out what's inside up to the front to get processed and create new ways of being, to create win-win scenarios, win-win interactions with you, to expand, to heal, and grow. It is almost, and I want to say this so that I'm not offending anybody. I don't want to give everyone a license to say this, but it's almost like if you get triggered by your loved one, you're welcome. I just help you get access to that thing so you can heal it. Now, when somebody triggers you and you go into a panic attack, you don't want to hear thank you. You're welcome. You don't want to hear you're welcome, right? You found your panic attack. If you're working with me, you might hear that, because let's heal this, because we get that healed once, it doesn't have to happen ever again. And so when you start to understand from my perspective, when you start your healing journey and when you have the tools to help your brain resolve any symptom, all of a sudden, none of these symptoms become threats. None of these symptoms become things we're afraid of anymore. We actually go hunting for them, and we process them. It's very gentle. It sounds very like archaic and equipped and blazing things, but and that is a bit of the attitude. But really, when we're engaging these things, it is a very, very gentle, beautiful process, and it is very quick. Brains heal and resolve these things very quickly. So why should we make an agreement to never trigger somebody? It doesn't make any sense. It makes sense based on the old ways where we thought we had to live with PTSD forever, where we had to experience post panic attacks forever, where we had to relive past events forever. And gosh, don't do that, right? And I don't want that. I don't want that for you. I don't want you to be stuck reliving events, but I also want you to know that this stuff is coming up to go out. It is coming up to heal. And there's no way not to do this except for to live close with each other but never have intimacy. And so what happens in this agreement to never trigger you is this is how we get walking on eggshells. This is the beginning of the other person's nervous system starting to shift into their own post-traumatic stress disorder, their own hypervigilance. And if you're becoming if you've made this agreement with yourself, this is one of where you're walking on eggshells. This is part of the disorder growing. And that's why it's important to get tools to really end this process, because that's not the loop we're creating here. We don't want to have post-traumatic stress about post-traumatic stress about post-traumatic stress. And that's really what happens. The other thing that happens from this is you make yourself smaller and smaller. This agreement does not make your life better. It doesn't give you more space to live in. It doesn't help you to expand. It doesn't help walk you into your next levels of expansion. It does not walk you into your dream life. This one is a prison. And I get it. I know exactly why it's here. I know what it feels like to be dreading your next panic attack, or your racing thoughts, or God to start dissociating again, or make a mistake, to feel shame, to feel embarrassment, to relive something. Get it. I get it. I get it. Let's get that stuff out of there. Let's get that stuff out of there so that you can see the doors open. Let's get that stuff out of there so you don't have to be afraid of being triggered again. And this is really where, when you watch your brain do it once, it's pretty amazing. And then you start to grow in confidence. And then you're like, oh my gosh, brain, you really can do this. And then you start going after this stuff. And then you start freeing your life of this stuff. And the next thing you know, you're like, wow, that really was a trap. And I made that agreement over and over and over again. And the last thing that happens with this agreement is that you lose your sense of self. I've done this with myself, and I've done this with somebody else. And I can't tell you, I've never been more confused in my life, because you're actually training yourself to look outward first and to wrap your life around that thing. And whether you're outward to the person with PTSD, or you're outward to the entity of PTSD running around in your world, you're not connecting with yourself. You don't matter anymore, because you've probably made one of the other agreements that we're going to talk about here too. And so all of yourself is coming into checking, does this going to affect them first? This is right. If you have your core here, and and you are connected with your core, you're going to be strong in the world and stable. If you're here and then your core and you're training, you're wiring your brain to consider them first before your own core. Now things are not things are not steady. The foundation is wobbly now. There's not it's and it goes and it's more and more and more and more, and pretty soon you lose your connection with yourself. You don't even know what you need anymore. You don't know what you want, and all of your options are blocked because you've made this agreement not to trigger them or not to trigger the PTSD within. So um, that is not the agreement. The second distorted agreement. Oh, let me say this. I'm calling this. I was going to call this unhealthy agreements, but I'm going to call it distorted agreements because these are not wrong. They're not exactly like this is not an all or nothing thing. There are times to not trigger. There are times to trigger. There are times to try to avoid triggering. And there are times to go right after triggering. There is not one answer. It's not an all or nothing situation, but PTSD almost always demands do not trigger me. And people with PTSD who are not in a healing stance with it will also really because they will be in their survival state about it, will be pretty demanding that you do not trigger this and do not make that agreement. Do not make that agreement with your PTSD and don't make that agreement with somebody else's. It's not a real thing. So the second distorted agreement is I will consider your needs first. And that's just what I was talking about a second ago. This is an easy one to slip into. It's so easy to start. It happens quickly, especially when you see somebody or yourself, you do it and they melt completely down or they dissociate for a week and you miss them and you want to be connected with them. And all of a sudden you can't because you did this thing, you said that thing, you made that face, now you can't. You're learning to wait. Before I say this, let me consider you first. And there's agreements that go with this, and this is absolutely something that PTSD demands. Consider me before anything else. And this is why when I'm working with people, we need to resolve these symptoms quickly, because we need you to come back to yourself. We need to change the wiring from the PTSD back to you. We need you to consider yourself first, but we need to get you the freedom to do that. And we do that by resolving one symptom after the other. And then you spend less and less time triggered. You spend less and less of your time hypervigilant, avoiding things, flashing back. And then you can actually start considering, what do I want? What do I need? Gosh, I've been in a survival mode so long. What do I need? Gosh, I've been caring for this disorder. I've been caring for trying not to step in spirals in my brain that will take me down for weeks or days on end. I don't even know what I need anymore. So really, it's really don't make the agreement to do that. And that this is a much more subtle one. It's not as blatant. This will also disconnect you with yourself. And there's no thanks for this because it's never enough. Once you do it the first time, then you do it the second time, because if you do it and it works, right? We have all these positive reinforcing loops. If you do it and it works, well, you're going to do it again. It doesn't matter if it actually is not fixing the problem. It doesn't matter that if it's just a band-aid from now. The next time there's a trigger, that person's brain, it might be yours, will say, hey, can you do that thing again? Brains need regulation. They need it desperately. And so if you dropping your needs to take care of somebody else's needs really does that thing for them that helps them to relax and calm and regulate their nervous system, their brain will remember that and actually begin forming an addiction to it, like a need for it. Like, and it remembers the memory of being regulated. It's like, can you do that thing? That's why we want to really wire in positive regulation tactics, because we want the brain to start reaching for stuff that's really healthy and quick effective. That's why I'm teaching people interventions, because I want their brain like, try this. How does this feel? Like, notice all that regulation, brain. You see that? Right? And then the brain's like, and then pretty soon their brain is asking that person for this instead of don't trigger me, instead of this, instead of that. And all of a sudden the brain's like, oh my gosh, we can solve these problems. And next thing you know, there's a team happening here. And you don't have to choose PTSD first. You don't have to care for this like that. There is a way to handle it that doesn't make your life smaller, it doesn't disconnect you from yourself, and it doesn't create loops, negative, positive, but they're not healthy. They're very painful loops that just grow. Um, don't make that agreement. The third agreement with PTSD is I agree, I'll go without. You have what you need, I'll go without. I'll go without the connection because obviously you need to not go out tonight. I'll go without the connection. Um, and again, hear this from if you're the one with PTSD, you're making these agreements too. I'll go without. I'll go without a support system. I'll go without leaving my house. I'll go without driving my car. I'll go without performing. I'll go without singing that next gig. I'll go without painting that painting. I'll go without being intimate with my partner. I'll go without. Or if you're in a relationship with someone with PTSD, you might be noticing, I'll go without that thing that triggers you. I'll go without it. I'll go without the need to go with my friends because I can see how distressing it makes you feel, how distressed it makes you feel. I'll go without. That is an agreement that never ends. Any of these agreements that feed this thing and give it more space and don't solve, like, we can make all these agreements to heal this stuff. This stuff doesn't need to be taking up our whole life, and we don't need to be passing it on, and we don't need to be sharing it. We can really heal these things. And so there's no reason to make agreements to go without. And PTSD, just like anxiety and depression, will always ask for more. It is an unstable process that is actually so expensive in the body. It's very similar to I mean, the body actually thinks it's kind of drowning all the time, right? If you were drowning, you would be reaching for help mindlessly. That's what PTSD is like in anxiety and depression. It's not a thought out situation. And I'll tell you what, anyone with PTSD is doesn't want to harm you like this. If they were in their prefrontal cortex, which is what these interventions that I'm teaching people, what they will help them shift them out of survival states and back into their prefrontal cortex, and then retrain their nervous system to get out of survival states and to live from the prefrontal cortex and really resolve all the issues that send it out there in the first place. I mean, gosh, we can resolve this stuff so quickly. And I help people do this in 2 to 6 months. I watch it happen all the time. I just had a client tell me that they've been off their medication for 6 months since this whole thing started. Like, they had never thought they would ever be off their depression medications again, ever. And here they are. So I just want you to know what I'm talking about, these results where we can heal. We cannot live triggered. We can live from the part of our brain that knows how to make thriving. We can do that. We don't have to make agreements with post-traumatic stress disorder that are just distortions. You can't even go without. That last agreement, you can't even go without. It creates depletions. Well, you can go without, but right, it's still another illusion that's created. But it does create depletion. You'll find yourself more exhausted. You'll find yourself less connected. You'll deplete your friend group. You can deplete your support system. You can deplete your finances over this. You can deplete so much, your relationships with your children. You can deplete. It's just a depletion cycle that I'll go without so that you can be safe. You can feel safe, right? And then there's loss, the loss of the connections, the loss of all this stuff, isolation. Gosh, it's like a gangster, right? I mean, just take all your stuff. But it's PTSD is just actually the brain trying to heal itself, and it's just stuck. And so if we can get that unstuck, we definitely don't have to make any of these agreements, and we don't have to live like this for decades or any decades longer than what you've already put in. And if you've been in this decades long, you know what I'm talking about. You know how depleting this is. And then what happens as well when you're talking about, I'm going to go without, now you have this, you're making all these sacrifices. That's the perfect ground for the martyr and the victim, right? So now you're doing this internal victim abuser dance, and you're doing this martyrdom and codependence, and then you have resentments, and then even the people that you're trying to help, now they resent you because you're not doing it enough, you're not doing it right, or you resent yourself because now you've given up all this stuff for this. It's a mess. It's a really, really painful mess. And these agreements are distortions. They do not lead to health. They do not lead to wellness. They do not lead to recovery from PTSD. And again, these are not all or nothing things. This is not like I won't go without in this moment. I will, I can create a win here where I'm going to go without for this. But gosh, that's not a blanket statement. Many codependent relationships have these things in here. If you had a mentally ill parent, you've made these agreements. I will not trigger you. I will not upset you. I will consider you first. Some of us made these agreements before we were conscious of ourselves, before we were four. We already knew I'll consider you first. We actually don't even have the wiring to ourself first. It's actually, we'll have a wiring outside of ourself first, and then we'll come in. That it sets us up for failure in the future. That is not the proper wiring for a human. We need to be connected to ourselves and then out. And not all of us got that kind of time and support to be able to do that. Many of our parents were calling out for help to anybody who would listen. And they were, because of their PTSD, they were really calling for these agreements. And as small children, we stepped in and said, I will consider you first. Not intentionally, but we've done this. We've been here. I will go without. I will go without the attention I need. I will go without the support I need. I will go without so that you can have. But it's never enough. I can't tell you how many teenagers and 20 some year olds that are in this right now that I'm working with, that they've made these agreements, and they're now coming out of these agreements to heal. It's beautiful, but it's hard. I made these agreements, right? These agreements are here. These agreements are part of what post-traumatic complex childhood trauma is all about, and they're lies. And so if you're new to the game or with PTSD, maybe, or you're late to the game, or you've been here in this game a whole long time, hear me, these do not make these agreements. And the pressure to do so will be great, but there is not a win here. So gosh, that's really what I want to share. I am happy to answer any questions that anybody asks me about this. Feel free to post those in the comments. If you're somebody who's made these agreements, or you're somebody who no longer wants to make these agreements and you would like to see if I can help you, this is exactly what I do. Exactly what I help people do is rewire themselves, heal from these issues, heal from post-traumatic stress disorder, and come out stronger. I would even say stronger than they were before. I don't know if I get to say that. I'm gonna have to review that. But it really, after we go through, because all these experiences, our brain really takes them and makes them. That's what our brain uses to make growth and expansion and wisdom. Are our experiences, whether they're traumatic or whether they're not traumatic. And so as we get them processed, we go through this massive growth. And I believe we're designed to be stronger than we were before. And there's lots of evidence that supports that. So, yeah, if that's something that you want to see if I can help you with, I would be happy to talk with you about what you would like to accomplish, what symptoms you want to get rid of, and to help you create a plan to get there. I offer free 45-minute calls where we discuss this, we take a look at this. I do this for two reasons. One, because I really want you to have a plan and get moving. And two, you may want my help to accomplish this, and we can talk about that as well. So, and if not, that's okay too. I really want you to have a plan and get going. So, and yeah. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and grab a spot on my calendar by going to rachelmcleod.com/call. And there you can pick a time that works for you. I'll call you at that time. Also, there's a little questionnaire. You can complete that. That will help you and I really prepare for our time to make the most out of those 45 minutes. So having said that, I'm not seeing any comments. This is I came on about talking about this gingerly because it's really powerful, and we have a lot of compassion for people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and Yeah. So you know, don't want to step on any toes or insult anyone yet. At the same time, um, these are just not the ones to make. There's so many. There's so many things we can do. We can really become healing partners. We can become supportive without getting wrapped up in other people or our own disorders. And that's a beautiful place to be because that's really a healing stance. And so brains don't always like that. I could talk about that more another time, but to not get what they want, yeah, you know, brains don't like that. That's a lot where fits come from. But those are actually pretty awesome processes if you know how to handle them as well, whether from yourself or from others. And you can get equipped from all of this with all of this. And so, um, yeah, we can heal and we can help each other heal. So I am going to jump off. Wonderful connecting tonight. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Definitely put them in the comments. Have you made these agreements? Have you currently decided not to make these agreements? Have you started setting some boundaries around these agreements? What was the response? How are you doing with that? Um, did you, you know, share your experiences, ask your questions. I'm here for that. I will be watching the comments and responding. And, you know, other people are watching the comments too. So you're not alone. And a lot of times people will say stuff that other people don't have the words for, and it's just really supportive. People have written stuff and somebody else is like, oh my gosh, I could have written this, or thanks for writing that, I appreciate it. um, yeah, absolutely share your thoughts on this. This is a powerful topic, and I think more of us have made these agreements than not. We've done our own experiments with these and learned some valuable lessons. I'd love to hear your lessons and your experiences with those, so feel free to share. Also, another thing is to I'm on YouTube, so you can watch more videos like this on my YouTube channel. And if you want to read the posts I've written about how to resolve these things in exact scenarios, or access to interventions that I like to offer people to start using, then you can grab a spot on my email list. Go to my website, join my email list. I will start sending you video trainings to give you some interventions to try and to see. We're really looking for the right match. Which ones help your brain complete its process for resolving symptoms? Because that's what matters. Can your brain figure this out? Can your brain resolve these issues? Brains have a beautiful process for resolving these issues, and they do get stuck. And so we want an intervention that will jump right in there and help your brain get unstuck, so that your brain can keep it moving and actually resolve those symptoms. So that's available on my email list. I start sending them out to you right away. Every 2 days, you get to try a different intervention for a bit. And when you find one that works, it's time to get to work. So you feel free to reach out to me about any of those things. And yeah, see you later. Take care. Bye.